Philip Rosenthal from Christian View Network. We have been speaking up on this issue since 2003, when the proposals were first made by the South African Law Reform Commission to accommodate same-sex marriage, and which we strongly opposed at the time and continue to oppose. I'm going to be addressing the proposals in this bill firstly, and then the arguments that are being used in favor of it. And then I will be looking at the core issues in the Constitutional Court judgment, which has motivated this whole process, and what the alternatives are to address those. So if I go to first what this bill effectively proposes, and why this is going to cause social problems, which will exacerbate the existing social problems that have already been created by these undermining and attacks on marriage. The first issue is what this marriage bill proposes. There were three alternatives that were considered for this marriage law, and at the moment we have the Marriage Act, which we fully support and believe is a social good in our society, and which the state has a vested interest to promote because it promotes many social benefits apart from just to those two individuals. Then there is the Customary Marriage Act, which allows for polygamy in the case of African tradition. And then there is the Civil Union Act that recognizes what we call fake same-sex marriage. We don't consider this marriage at all. Then there is the Muslim divorce ruling, which would accommodate potentially polygamous marriages from that tradition. Now, the three alternatives that were considered previously were a Unitary Marriage Act, which we pushed as the worst option, and this is the option that is being looked at the moment. We hope that this will be scrapped. Then there's the Omnibus Act, which is many chapters with different forms of marriage. That is a middle option in our opinion. Then there is the separate acts, which are the existing situation, which we believe are preferred. Our objections to the marriage bill that is being proposed is firstly that so-called same-sex marriage is put in the same category as real marriage between a man and a woman. Secondly, that any marriage can become polygamous even if that person has promised to be faithful to one wife. Now, this is a proposal which I'm not aware of any other country in the world which allows a person to covenant to one woman and then decide to change his mind later. If, for example, you are in Nigeria or in India and you covenant with one woman for life in a monogamous marriage, you cannot change your mind later and decide you want to become polygamous. Women are easily pressurized and in a vulnerable power position, economic position, and I don't accept this view that the court is going to be able to check whether there is consent. There can be pressure. So any man can take a second wife. We have a major objection to that. That is completely different to a person who is in a particular tradition, such as, for example, African polygamous tradition or Muslim tradition, which has checks and balances internal in it. And people are living in the constraints of that community. This now is an attempt to radicalize and change monogamous marriage for all, which is definitely a socially preferred form of marriage. There is documented academic research showing the benefits of this marriage, and the vast majority of South Africans are moving towards this form of marriage with a preference. Then there's the problem of religious freedom risks. That we have had repeated assaults from LGBT activists on the right of religious people or moral people not to want to participate in this marriage fraud or calling things marriage that are not marriage. Then there's the problem of moral confusion that is caused by this process of recognizing things as marriage which are not actually marriage. So the threats to marriage officers, this bill has no protection for state marriage officers. The pastors, there is an exception clause for pastors not to be coerced to do same-sex marriage, that is religious marriage officers. But that clause can be removed very easily, just as it was in the case of the Civil Union Act, and we predicted that would happen. It did happen. We have a lobby group that spoke earlier that wanted removed, and I'm sure they will continue to lobby in that direction. If we keep it in separate bills, there is no chance of that happening. There's no chance of litigation. Pastors don't have to defend themselves because they are not registered to do anything other than marriage between a man and a woman. So we oppose that. There are some risks which have been raised by previous speakers of freedom of religion essay about the interpretation of clause 17, which I will not repeat, but I agree with what they said there. Now, I would compare this removal of this boundary by moving these different forms of marriage together with the removal of the borders, the natural borders of Czechoslovakia just before World War II. It had defensible borders in this blue area, which were mountains. As soon as they crossed those, they continued to cross the next thing. We have a defensible border at the moment, which is separate marriage acts. Then there is the issue of the need for multiple defenses to protect any kind of security, including religious freedom and even your own home. You don't rely on just one thing, for example, a dog or an electric fence. You want as many layers of security as possible, and these separate marriage laws give us a layer of security. People are registered to marry in terms of one marriage law, which is between a man and a woman. They are not then put under threat. We would like that defense to be added back to state marriage officers. Now, this is a toxic experiment that no country in the world has ever tried before and can have disastrous results. That is the combination of same-sex marriage, polygamy, and gender change, which we had one of the previous speakers advocating in favor of and wanting to extend that. The history of this is the wrong ruling of the Court in 2005, which we hope will be reversed, just like Roe v. Wade was reversed, and then later the Civil Union Act that came out of that, and then the removal of in 29 to 2020 of the protection of home affairs workers, which we believe need to be restored. Now, we predicted back in 2005 that following the trends in other countries, this legalization of so-called same-sex marriage would lead to a drop in the number of people getting married. And that is exactly what happened, which is, which you can see in the graph above, which is approximately halving of the number of people getting married versus just living together and still having children. That is a disastrous situation, which I would compare to the problem of ESCOM not generating enough power. Eventually, it results in the disaster of load shedding. These children growing up without fathers stable in the home is a social disaster that this will fall on the state to have to deal with eventually, and they don't have the capacity to do that. So what we want to do now is strengthen marriage. The destruction of marriage and undermining of marriage leads to school dropout, low marks, gangs, drugs, poverty, joblessness, teen pregnancy, and social grants. That can be statistically proved. This is not just a religious issue. This is a catastrophic economic and social problem. Then there is the recognition of sinful relationships as if they were marriage. This is the combination of so-called same-sex marriage with marriage between a man and a woman. But at least they were kept separate on a separate register, and people didn't have to be involved in them in this Civil Union Act. Now they intend to combine these things. And no, this was not just an oversight in 2005. The government opposed this Constitutional Court ruling. They fought it at every step, Most of the parliamentary representatives of the ruling party were opposed to this, and this was a compromise that they agreed to. It was not just an oversight, and it was there for a reason. I would also compare this recognition of counterfeit marriage with recognition of counterfeit money. It undermines real money. Now, then there are seven false arguments that have been put forward for this thing. First is a bait and switch argument of the Muslim divorce ruling. Firstly, we've heard from the Muslims that they don't want this bill. They want their own bill or the omnibus bill. And secondly, they are not in favor of same-sex marriage. Then the argument that this is required by the Constitution. Now, this we've had from both Albie Sachs and Carter Usmall, that this was agreed in Dublin in Carter Usmall's kitchen, that they would include sexual orientation in the Constitution. It was not approved by the South Africans in this country. Albie Sachs, the same person, then rules in favor of same-sex marriage in 2005. And he reads an enormous amount in 2 words in the Constitution that nobody had even proposed at the time the Constitution was written. The simple solution to this is remove it by a constitutional amendment, similar to what many other countries have, recognizing marriage between a man and a woman. Then the argument that you can't bias Christianity with monogamy. Now, India, for example, had polygamy for thousands of years. They have only 2% Christians, but they decided that they would have one man, one woman marriage, except with the exception for Muslims, since 1955. Then the argument that it is tidying up fragmentary marriage laws, I would say there was a compromise in 2006, which was reluctantly agreed on between the government and the Concord. Most of Parliament opposed this thing. And now this is pushing this radical agenda much further. Customary law is vanishing. Most people are not choosing that way to get married. And this would have very, very major impacts. Then the argument of democracy. There was no vote on sexual orientation in the Constitution, no vote on same-sex marriage, and the polls are showing that almost nobody supported the decision to legalize same-sex marriage in 2005 and 6, and continue to oppose it. Then the argument of African culture. African culture does not support same-sex marriage and is already accommodated in the Customary Marriages Act, although fewer and fewer people are choosing this option each year. Then the argument of international law, and there's a law on discrimination against women that was cited. I have a map here of the countries in green that have agreed to that law. These other countries do not have anything like this proposal. Only the red countries have not signed this thing. We can see that this is a completely misleading argument. The other argument that was put forward by a previous speaker, which is highly misleading, as a reference to the Yoga Carta principles as international law. They are not international law. This was just a conference of non-profits. It has no status in the United Nations.
Sorry.
Okay.
Okay, you're working towards a conclusion.
Okay. So we argue the constitutional amendments of delete sexual orientation and marriage between a man and a woman only. Listening to the presentations and submissions of the Muslim groups, and the Constitutional Court ruling, we've identified 4 issues that we need to consider. The one is the presence of the woman at the ceremony versus a proxy. The second is retrospective recognition, and third, potentially polygamous. The fourth is the request for a parallel cultural law. I think the first 3 issues are recognized by the Women's Legal Center ruling. The first 2 could be accommodated within the Marriage Act. The third could not, but the third could be accommodated within a chapter in the Customary Marriages Act or a separate Marriage Act. The fourth would have to be in a separate Marriage Act. I think the simplest approach to responding to the Concord judgment would be to simply codify what they have ordered and nothing else. And then to consider other proposals after that. This bill would cause major social problems. It would be akin to bashing down the structural walls of a house rather than doing interior decorating changes. And we would have a much worsening of an already problematic situation.
Oh, thank you very much, Ms. Rosenthal, for your contributions. One of the areas that you need to learn, Mr. Rosenthal, is to benchmark your language. We were not necessarily or not at all have interacted with the presentation, but it's important that we when we raise our issues, we don't seek to denigrate any other category in society. And secondly, is that you have indicated that one of the presenters were misleading this meeting. And I don't think that it's your call to articulate in the manner that you have suggested. You could have grounded your motivation to contest the views that have been raised. So I wanted just to raise those 2 points so that we were able to recognize that all the submissions are important, including yours, but none of those that have presented before have referred to each other as in the manner that you did. I'm trying to be firm on the because you're not only talking to members of the committee, but also the public. I've been observing your comments throughout the public hearings. I must say, it won't help you and us. So we need to benchmark our language. Noted. Thanks very much for the presentation.